The year was 1932, a time when the world was still trying to find its footing after the devastation of the Great War. The world was still reeling from the Great War, grappling with the scars left behind and the memories of battles fought and lives lost. And Australia, a young nation forged in the crucible of conflict, faced a new and unexpected enemy, the emu. These large, flightless birds were about to become the center of a bizarre and almost surreal chapter in history. This wasn't a skirmish or a minor border incident, it was a full-scale confrontation, one that would pit man against nature in a way that had never been seen before. This was full-blown war, declared by the government itself against a foe that couldn't shoot back, or so they thought. The emus, with their surprising resilience and numbers, would prove to be a formidable adversary. The Great Emu War, as it came to be known, was a testament to the absurdity inherent in even the most serious of situations. It highlighted the unpredictable nature of conflict and the unexpected challenges that can arise, and a stark reminder that nature in its own way is always capable of fighting back. The emus, driven by instinct and survival, were not going to be easily subdued. This wasn't a fight for territory or resources in the traditional sense. It was a battle for the very survival of the farmers and their way of life. It was a fight for survival, for the livelihoods of farmers struggling to eke out an existence in the harsh Australian outback. These farmers, already facing the challenges of a tough environment, now had to contend with an unexpected and relentless enemy. Picture this: thousands upon thousands of emus, those giant flightless birds with their long legs and beady eyes, descending upon fields of wheat, devouring everything in sight. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. It was a scene straight out of a Hitchcock film, only instead of terrorizing a small town, these feathered fiends were wreaking havoc on the Australian economy. The impact was profound, affecting not just the farmers but the entire community. The emus were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. They moved in flocks, overwhelming the fields and leaving destruction in their wake. They were like a feathered plague, stripping fields bare and leaving despair in their wake. The farmers watched helplessly as their hard work was undone by these voracious birds. The farmers, many of whom were veterans of the Great War, were desperate. They had returned from the battlefields of Europe only to find themselves in a new kind of war, one that was just as challenging and demoralizing. They had fought and bled for their country, only to return home to face a new enemy, one that didn't wear a uniform or carry a rifle, but was just as formidable in its own right. The emus, with their sheer numbers and persistence, were a force to be reckoned with. And so, in an act of desperation, they turned to the only power they believed could help, the Australian government. The government, recognizing the severity of the situation, decided to take action, leading to one of the most unusual military campaigns in history. To understand the Great Emu War, we need to rewind a bit, back to the aftermath of World War I. The world was reeling from the devastation, and Australia was no exception. Australia, like many nations, was still licking its wounds, its economy battered, its people weary. The war had taken a heavy toll, leaving behind a trail of economic hardship and social upheaval. Thousands of veterans, hardened by years of fighting, returned home to a country struggling to accommodate them. These men, who had faced the horrors of war, now faced the uncertainty of peace. Many were promised land, a chance to start anew and carve out a living from the vast Australian landscape. The government saw this as a way to both reward their service and boost agricultural production. These soldier settlers, as they were known, were given plots of land in Western Australia, much of it marginal and unforgiving. The land was often remote, with little infrastructure or support. They were tasked with taming the outback, transforming it into arable land that could feed the nation and provide them with a livelihood. It was a monumental task, requiring grit, determination, and no small amount of hope. It was a daunting task, made even more challenging by the harsh climate, the unforgiving terrain, and the constant threat of drought. The outback was a land of extremes, where survival was a daily struggle. But these were men who had stared death in the face, who had endured unimaginable hardships. They were no strangers to adversity, and they brought that same resilience to their new lives as farmers. They were determined to make a go of it, to build a better future for themselves and their families. They built homes, planted crops, and tried to create a sense of normalcy in a land that was anything but. Little did they know that their greatest challenge wouldn't come from the land itself, but from the creatures that called it home. The emus, with their gangly legs and curious nature, were about to become an unexpected adversary. Emus, those comical-looking birds that seem to embody the Australian spirit, tough, resilient, and more than a little bit absurd, had always coexisted with the Aboriginal people, who hunted them for food and used their feathers for ceremonial purposes. This balance had existed for centuries, but the arrival of European settlers with their fences and farms upset this delicate balance. The emus, once a part of the natural order, now found themselves at odds with the new human inhabitants and their agricultural ambitions. The emus, you see, were creatures of habit, following ancient migratory patterns that had been ingrained in their species for generations. They followed the rains, seeking out areas where fresh vegetation sprouted, driven by an instinctual need to find food and water in the arid landscape. The problem was, these areas increasingly coincided with the farmers' fields, particularly the wheat crops that were the backbone of the soldier settlers' livelihoods. The lush, green wheat fields were an irresistible draw for the emus. Emus, with their prodigious appetites and complete disregard for property lines, saw these fields as giant buffets ripe for the picking. They moved in with little hesitation, feasting on the crops that the farmers had painstakingly cultivated. At first, the emus were just a nuisance, a minor inconvenience in the daily struggle of farming life. Farmers would chase them away, hoping they would move on. But as their numbers grew, so too did their impact. The emu flock swelled, and their presence became more than just a minor irritation. They descended upon the fields in their thousands, their powerful legs trampling crops, their beaks stripping away grain with alarming efficiency. The damage they caused was extensive and devastating. The farmers watched in dismay as their hard work, their hopes for a better future, were devoured by these feathered marauders. The emus left a trail of destruction in their wake, and the farmers felt powerless to stop them. Word of the emu plague, as it was soon dubbed, reached the capital Perth, and then spread like wildfire through the nation. The plight of the farmers became a topic of national concern. Newspapers ran sensationalized accounts of the emu menace, complete with dramatic headlines and illustrations of these avian adversaries. The public was captivated by the story of the emus and the struggling farmers. The farmers, their pleas for help, initially ignored, now found themselves with a national audience. Their struggle against the emus had become a symbol of the broader challenges faced by rural communities in Australia.